and welcome to the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe in the studios of our flagship stations, Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM. In addition today, as always, also joining us on Comcast Channel 15 and AT&T Channel 99 in the Birmingham-Bloomfield area is Birmingham Area Municipal Access. We're also on the radio, 88.1 WBFH, The Biff, and on the Facebook page today of West Bloomfield Parks at facebook.com/WB Parks. Go ahead and give them a like and thank them for joining us. Also joining me today, as always, from her home studios is Ronnie Dahl.
Tyler, whenever someone asked you, what do you do again? How do you explain the show? Because whenever we say, hey, this is where you can find us, there are so many TV, radio stations, as well as social media involved, trying to explain that, hey, this is what makes us the Megacast. It's always kind of a fun conversation.
Yeah, we're all over the place, and not just on the media. Not just on different forms of media. So that's kind of how I explain it, is we take a show that you would see on TV, take a show you'd see on the radio, take a show that you'd see on the web, and combine it all into one giant bunch, and that is exactly what we do. We do one big show that's on every single one of them, and kind of takes elements of all of the above into play. So that's kind of how I explain it.
It really is kind of the future of where media is going. I mean, already our mainstream media is, streaming live. Their newscast as well. The only component that is missing out of that would be the radio. And there are some stations that are on the radio as well. Typically, I forget, it's like your Channel 6 stations, and I forget why. But that is what the Megacast is. And, you wonder, Tyler, will the Megacast one day come to an end because we'll be out of the pandemic?
I don't know about that. Maybe it will. Maybe it'll be modified into something different and more of a community-centric talk program instead of a news-specific and news talk program like we currently have. But I'm not sure. I think it's going to definitely be something we continue on, whether it's in the capacity that we currently do it, where it's so much focused on local news. Maybe that is a little bit less of a factor, or maybe it continues to be, and this is just a place you go for community news in depth here in Oakland County specifically going forward, even beyond the pandemic.
Yeah, one thing I think that has come out of the pandemic, people are realizing just how important hyper-local news is to how they are living day to day, and also what's changing in their communities. Because for those that don't know, the Megacast was actually developed out of the COVID-19 crisis, because the news and the decisions have been changing so fast and sometimes on a day-to-day basis. But we're more than 10 months into this, and that is continuing to be the case. And what could be happening in, say, Detroit or Macomb County is not necessarily the same thing that is happening here in West Bloomfield, Keiko Harbor, Sylvan Lake, or some of our other communities as well. So I think hyper-local during this crisis, because while the vaccine is bringing hope, we are still looking that pretty much 2021, I think, is going to end up looking the same. We are going to be required to wear a mask. You are going to still need the COVID-19 test. That's going to be a big thing of 2021. I've been talking to some friends, and for them, in order to, like salespeople, to be able to go into some of these businesses, they're also requiring now like a negative COVID-19 test within so many days of visiting their site. Some of the same things that we're seeing with travel right now as well.
Yeah, the versatility is going to be big in a lot of different industries going forward, and I think that's certainly going to be something that impacts us here and impacts the news all across the board going forward after the lessons we've all learned from reporting during the pandemic and keeping people informed and entertained as well during the pandemic.
And of course, it's no surprise that COVID-19 is expected to be the big focus for the governor's third State of the State address that is going to be taking place tonight at 7 o'clock. And the speech could also make history just in its format alone, Tyler, because of the concerns about the spread of the virus. The governor is going to break tradition by not delivering her speech directly in front of state lawmakers in the House chamber. Instead, what is going to be happening, she's going to be speaking over a video feed, and then the legislators are planning to watch from home. So that is going to be a big difference this year. And Whitmer, who of course is a Democrat, is expected to talk about the very familiar theme over the past year, and that's COVID-19, her administration's response to the crisis, as well as the state's potential emergence from the pandemic through vaccinations, and also a plan to address some of the learning lapses that we all know is happening right now due to the pandemic, as well as a boost to the state economy through stimulus dollars. Now, of course, the address comes as the Republican leaders. They, of course, have not been too happy with the governor and her administration. They want to move away from executive orders and that decision-making process to allow the GOP-controlled legislator to be more involved in some of these state policy choices, especially the reopening of some of the restaurants and businesses. And one of the big things right now, the headline, of course, it surrounds high school sports and allowing the kids to play again.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of pushback, of course, from the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans in our state legislature on a lot of what the governor will say tonight. They already have made a lot of pushback throughout this pandemic. They want to have more input from the legislature in these decisions, and to some extent they've been granted those abilities and simply have not taken them, leading the administration, the governor's administration and the Department of Health and Human Services to have to do that themselves. And then in turn, that ended up being essentially similar or exactly the same to what the governor had been doing before those incidents had come up. So definitely going to be a lot of questions coming out of the state tonight. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of pushback following the governor's state of the state from the House and Senate Republicans in the state of Michigan and what they object to and what she says and how they want to have more of an input in decisions regarding COVID-19 regulations and lifting of restrictions and so on and so forth. It will be interesting to see whether or not they take one out of the book of U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and maybe rip up the governor's speech virtually instead of in person.
I will say at some point in time, there are days I just want to say to our elected leaders, grow up.
Exactly.
You're acting like
Thank you.
the children on both sides. Like if you polled some of the actions and the stunts that they pull in an actual, like a business, you'd be fired. You would not be able to act like that. And yet there are our elected leaders working for us and they continue to do so. Grow up and roll up your sleeves and learn to work together. That's what you have to do. It's called a compromise. And sometimes you give, sometimes you get.
Exactly.
And they need to start doing this. I mean, we're more than 10 months into this. Get it together, folks.
Yeah, no,
That's done with my right.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. I agree. I know I had a trigonometry professor. I had to take trigonometry once at OCC. I took it over the summer while I was in school. And whenever we had an issue with something, someone got stuck on a problem and they didn't know what to do. They were going through all our formulas, going through their notes. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know what next step to do. My trigonometry professor said, do something. Even if you don't know what to do in this moment, make some sort of a plan. Try something out. Do something. And so for these House and Senate Republicans that have been complaining about the governor taking too much action herself against COVID-19, do something. Write some bills. Negotiate with the governor's office and be willing to compromise. And then from the governor's angle, similarly, complaining that the House and Senate legislature are taking too much aggressive action against you and against your actions regarding COVID-19, do something. Open that door up. Maybe listen a little bit. Maybe be more willing to put Republican input into your decision making, or at least just keep them in the loop before you make these decisions. There's compromises that can be made. They just both sides here are just refusing to make them and negotiate with one another and govern properly.
Well, on a good note here, though, Michigan continues to show a decline in some of the COVID cases, where other parts of the country, the numbers are still pretty high. Here in the state of Michigan, they continue to decline. The health department reported 1,476 new cases and 79 new deaths in the state yesterday, bringing the total number of cases since March to 552,556, with just over 14,000 deaths. The good thing about this, though, look at the numbers compared to the vaccine. So the state has now shipped nearly 1.5 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine, and it has been administered to over 760,000 doses have been administered so far. So that is good news. That shows that we are moving in the right direction. If the vaccine is going to be our way out of the pandemic, people are starting to get the vaccine. Michigan had a positivity rate of 7.09%. So the positivity rate is one of the things that the governor and her team, they look at to determine some of these restrictions and how they're going to move forward with some of their decision making. And the good thing with that, though, those numbers, I would anticipate, though, will start to go up as more and more things start to reopen on the 1st of February.
Yeah, that's to be expected. It's happened before. Those numbers have slightly increased. If you see a major jump, then you know that those decisions have probably had an adverse impact. However, a slight increase in positive cases is not going to be entirely alarming in those first 10 days to 2 weeks that they're looking for new cases to see how that activity has been modified after these restaurants reopen to partial capacity, 25% indoor capacity, beginning on the 1st of February, next week, Monday. But still, the governor's office, the state of Michigan, the Health and Human Services Department, they're looking to get us closer to that 3% threshold, get us under that, which is a very low chance of community spread in that range. And we're getting closer to that. It's been hovering around 6-7% over the last couple of weeks. Good news with the vaccinations being distributed at a higher rate as of late, that we may get back on track with vaccinations in Michigan here hopefully soon, or at least reduce how far back behind we are. And that'll also help hopefully with the positive case rate going forward, especially as we continue to be extremely cautious of the new variants from the UK that have been found in Michigan.
So there's a new study out about the antibody drugs. We really haven't heard a lot about this, but new results extend hopes for drugs that supply antibodies to fight COVID-19, suggesting they can help keep patients out of the hospital and possibly prevent illness in some uninfected people. So Eli Lilly said Tuesday that a 2 antibody combo reduced the risk of hospitalizations or death by 70%. And newly diagnosed non-hospitalized COVID-19 patients at high risk of serious illness because of age or other health conditions. All 10 deaths that did occur in the study were among those receiving placebos rather than the antibodies. So separately, Regeneron Pharmaceuticals said partial results from an ongoing study suggest its drug combo completely prevented symptomatic infections in housemates of someone with COVID-19. Importantly, the drug was given as multiple shots rather than through an IV. The need for an infusion has greatly limited the use of antibody drugs in the pandemic because of healthcare shortages. So this could be another way out, or at least to be able to control and manage the COVID-19 and the virus, and especially as the variant continues to spread across the country and here in the United States as well. So good news, because we're not really hearing a lot about the antibodies and treatment for those.
Yeah, that's certainly good news. It's going to be well received that these 2 antibody combos are reducing hospitalizations and death by such a significant rate in newly diagnosed cases, and having an extra treatment that can be used against COVID-19 after someone has tested positive is going to make for hopefully a lower death rate, less time that someone is spending fighting COVID-19, and that the hospital systems and medical systems are spending treating COVID-19. And it helps as we have some delays in distributing the COVID-19 vaccines, that we have a treatment that may help lessen the severity of COVID-19 in some patients, or help get them out of the COVID-19 woods, so to speak, quicker.
Yeah, I know, you can get an antibody test. I want to go get that this week. I believe you can even get it like at Kroger, because so many members of my family, following my mom's funeral, had tested positive for COVID-19. So it makes you wonder, did you have it and you just didn't know it? So I want to get tested for the antibodies, but it's also playing into who's getting vaccinated. and who isn't as well. So interesting conversation around that. Again, just as a reminder, you can get the latest headlines. Go to civiccentertv.com, click on the coronavirus tab. That's where you'll find the latest headline. We post them each and every morning prior to coming on the air. With that, though, we have a great show for you here on this Wednesday edition of the Megacast. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Chris Cooper. He's the owner of Zeppelin Cleaning Services. Why are they important right now, and what should businesses doing as more and more people start to return to the office? This is the Oakland County Megacast.
Michigan, the coronavirus pandemic has put us all to the test, and now it's time to put COVID-19 to the test. As we move forward, testing will be critical. We encourage anyone who has reason to get tested to do so, those with symptoms and those without. If you are leaving home and going back to work, get tested. If you think you may have COVID-19 or you've been exposed recently through family, friends, or coworkers, get tested. Our test locator tool can help you find the right testing site that fits your needs. Even if you're looking for easy access with no cost, no prescription, and no appointment necessary, we've got you covered. Help Michigan move forward, not backward. To find a testing site or learn more, visit michigan.gov/coronavirus test. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Perry tested positive for COVID-19. Emma was exposed to a friend who's positive. Willa's waiting on test results. After any contact with COVID-19, or if you test positive, stay home for at least 10 days. If you live with others, keep your distance and wear a mask. Help Michigan contain COVID-19. Visit michigan.gov/contain-COVID.
Great to have you with us here on this Wednesday. Thank you for taking time out to be with us. Just as a reminder too, if you maybe don't have time to tune in to the entire show today, you can always catch the entire Megacast if you go to civiccentertv.com. They will post the show later in the afternoon, but also you can get interviews, the individual interviews that we do as well. They break them down and post them on civiccentertv.com. So you can view previous interviews with some of our other guests as well, going all the way back to where the actual show started, and that was this past March. With us today, kicking off the show on this Wednesday, we're going to bring in Chris Cooper. He's the owner of Zeppelin Cleaning Services. Thanks, Chris, for taking time out of your Wednesday to be with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell us about your business.
So we provide professional janitorial or commercial cleaning services to a number of businesses throughout Metro Detroit. And it's anything from car dealerships to medical facilities to retail, pretty much any kind of workspace. We have a cleaning solution that works for almost anything.
We are all looking at cleaning completely different now than we did even 10 months ago. How has that changed with your business as well? Because remember back in the beginning of the pandemic, they were saying, hey, the virus can be on your packages, not on your packages, how long it lasts on services. How has that changed, and the information changing impacted your business and how you operate?
We're constantly trying to keep up with what the CDC is saying, and with EPA recommendations on what they recommend to clean certain things. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel or anything like that. And most of the products that we were using before are effective against coronavirus, as well as the flu and hepatitis and tuberculosis and things that people are concerned with. But we're much more mindful of CDC recommendations, and I would encourage anybody to go to CDC and sign up for the emails that come in. They're very informative.
So as a business owner, what have you learned through this pandemic?
I've learned that what we do is very important. especially for the confidence for people to return to work. They want to know that there is somebody managing that and somebody with the knowledge of how to manage it, to have their employees return to work, and then they can say, okay, here, we have this taken care of. You have the confidence to come back to a safe environment.
I will say at the beginning of this pandemic, I was working in an office building down in Detroit. And I remember going back into the office. There were only a few people. Everyone was still at home. But looking around, thinking, they haven't done anything. They put like a box of Clorox wipes out, which I think they even took from my office. And I was like, not really safe. So wiping down things with Clorox wipes, while it helps, it's not the same as bringing in a professional company such as yours.
True story. There are household things that you can use that are absolutely effective against combating this virus specifically. Bleach, for example, is what the CDC is recommending. In our line of work, though, people don't want their place smelling like a swimming pool. So we have to adjust accordingly.
Yeah, I wonder about that because there was a lawsuit a few years ago where someone sued because a coworker's perfume was overpowering. So really, you have to take into consideration the smells that come along with some of these cleaning solutions, right? I mean, there's a reason why I can't paint my nails in an office setting or on an airplane.
You're absolutely right. And for the most part, we do try to use things that are without a fragrance because there are so many personal preferences. However, in some smaller office environments where there may be like 6 or 7 people, they may say, we love the lavender smell, and they may prefer it, so we can adjust accordingly to that type of situation too.
Right. Because while it's not just for some people, it's more than just being annoying. People can be allergic to some of these things as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's definitely a consideration that you have to make.
So what has business been like for you? Are you on the upswing because of this pandemic, or are people holding off because they're not bringing the employees into the offices like they used to?
Overall, it's up because the facilities that have stayed open, like manufacturing and medical, have increased the frequency at which they're doing cleaning. Some of the others, restaurants, fitness places, have decreased. But as an overall net, we're definitely ahead of where we were in March. I think there's a lot of people who really see the value of having a professional service performing this so that they can focus on what their business is rather than trying to constantly disinfect their workplace.
So it's good to see that you have a balancing act there too. But, as we go in to February 1st, some of these new restaurants or the restaurants are going to be allowed to start to reopen to the public again. When should a business owner make the decision to bring in a professional service such as yours versus trying to have employees maintain the building?
I think it's up to everybody's individual preferences. Smaller operations where people are on staff that need hours, they can be trained in how to disinfect. But I would say that there is a lot that goes into disinfecting properly, and there's a lot of people that aren't doing it the right way. So even if somebody even called me and wanted some consulting on how to do it, I'm happy to provide that for them as well.
That's awesome, because I'm sure a lot of people have those questions as well, because it's not so much as just, spraying some Lysol spray on the door handles or this, that, and the other. How do you treat a business or a location differently if they've had a recent COVID-19 outbreak, or do you?
So there are a lot of companies that are providing, and you may have heard of this, a fogging where you go in and you kind of spray this antimicrobial. I do not do that. And the reason I don't do it is because the CDC hasn't recommended it. What they recommend is basically how you would think it would be done, where we're putting on a solution with either 2 to 10 minutes of kill time, and then we're going back over it with the rag to wipe it off. But I think where a lot of people get it wrong is that any solution has at least a 2-minute kill time. So it has to be left on the surface in order for it to be effective.
Oh my God. I'm sitting here thinking how I wipe my counters down today. I never do that, right? You spray it and you immediately wipe it off.
Right. And I don't want to say it's completely ineffective because it's better than doing nothing, but the correct way, is to leave it on for at least 2 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on what type of product you're using. And if you go to the EPA website, they have a list of everything that's effective against this virus and the kill time too. So if you're ever in question, that's a great resource.
Chris Cooper with us. He's the owner of Zeppelin Cleaning Services, which does provide services throughout the Metro Detroit area. And with that, Chris, tell us, what solutions did you have to change what you were purchasing in order to address COVID-19 directly? Or is it really kind of a misnomer that you need something specific for this? Because if it kills a virus, is it going to kill COVID-19 as well?
So I'm glad you asked that, because the products that we've been using for the last at least 5 years are effective against human coronavirus. So we've been ahead of the curve the whole time. As you may already know, there are different forms of coronavirus. This is a new strain of coronavirus, but coronavirus has been around for a long time. So to answer your question, yes, the products that we use are listed on the EPA website as effective against human coronavirus.
See, look at that. You were prepared for a pandemic and didn't even know it.
That's right. We're like a crystal ball.
Hey, Chris, we're hearing a lot right now. The governor recently, in her press conference, when she announced the reopening of restaurants for indoor dining, starting on the 1st of February, one thing she was also talking about was the importance of ventilation systems. Does that include duct cleaning and some of these other things that maybe the regular person doesn't think about?
So we do, in our residential area, we do offer duct cleaning as well. And it is a great service because there are so many things that get caught, not on the ductwork itself, but in the dust that lies in the ductwork. Heavy metals from household cleaning products, dust mites, and viruses and bacteria. So it's definitely... ventilation systems definitely need to be cleaned, just like everything else. The average home circulates air 7 times in a day. So if you have stuff that's not supposed to be in your vent system, you are exposing yourself 7 times a day. And with the advent of windows and doors that seal so well, indoor air quality is at an all-time low. So yes, I agree with Governor Whitmer on that ventilation systems need to be looked at. And there are also UV lights that are effective in killing certain viruses and bacteria.
I'm looking at it because it seems like I have to dust like every single day. I'll look, I'm like, where did that come from? I just dusted, because right now too, obviously, we're in Michigan. It's winter time. We are not leaving a window open right now.
That's right. Yeah, but honestly, that is one of the best things you can do against this virus is to get some ventilation into your home.
That's some good advice there. Hey, Chris, so we talked a little bit about the commercial side. On the residential side, what advice do you have for just regular people out there too, inside their homes?
I don't know that I'll be able to give you anything super insightful. Routine cleaning, washing your hands, just making sure that surfaces stay free of contaminants is always just a good idea anyway, especially now that we're in flu season, and now more than ever, it's good to keep things clean. And like I said, if you're lacking in knowledge about household cleaners, a solution as simple as bleach and water is an effective disinfection agent. So that's an easy one.
Well, easy, but also rough on the hands.
A little bit, yeah. Work gloves, yeah.
Hey, tell us before we let you go, just another minute or two here with you. With that, what's it been like for you to try to get employees to work? Because we do know so many businesses are struggling. Some are thriving, many are struggling. What's it been like for you and people in your industry?
It was challenging for a minute, but our business pays quite a bit higher than industry average, and we do that because we're trying to recruit the best, and that's kind of how we sell ourselves, is that, you know, we are the best, we recruit the best, we give you the best value. So I know that there has been a lot of struggle out there to find people during this. We haven't had too much of an issue with that, thankfully.
Yeah, that's a great place to be in as a business owner. But when you're looking at that as well, when we're talking about COVID-19 and in the workplaces as well, what's it been like for you and your staff? Have you had any outbreaks, and are you concerned about them being exposed when you go into some of these confined locations?
Yeah, it's definitely a concern. And on our side, we're doing testing daily for temperatures and things like that to make sure that not only that if we've been exposed that we take care of ourselves, but we would never want to go into an area where we were potentially exposing someone going the opposite way. So yeah, we've definitely taken it very seriously and taken measures to make sure that the staff stays safe and keeps everyone safe that we're servicing.
It really is like a juggling act, right? And as the owner, you have so many pieces in the air each and every day, and trying to make sure your staff is safe, but also keeping your customers safe. I would think it's a bit challenging at times.
Things are changing constantly. My wife was like, "Are you ever going to put your phone down?" And I'm like, "I hope so." You know, so yeah, it has been challenging, but it's been a really good learning experience. To be honest with you, it's like if we can handle this, everything else should be pretty easy, right?
We hope so. We so hope so. But you are exactly right. When you look at life as a learning experience, then you can appreciate what you had before, and hopefully getting back there as well.
Yeah.
Chris Cooper with us here. He's the owner of Zeppelin Cleaning Services. Chris, before we let you go, anything maybe I didn't ask that you want to add?
Like I think you mentioned it before, it now more than ever, it's important to have a professional service that can tailor the cleaning experience to what your specific needs are. You know, somebody who has 1,000 people walking through their business a day is going to have much different needs than a small insurance company that only sees 8 employees. So, yeah, and professional services can accommodate either one of those.
I also wonder about some of these office buildings. Like, you know, you may be hired by the actual office building to treat, you know, those in and out areas. But if the individual buildings or businesses within aren't doing it, then that could actually help spread the virus if someone has it. So it's got to be challenging each and every day for you guys.
Yeah, we do work alongside some of the bigger facilities, have someone on staff, you know, that's managing that, and then we're kind of adding on to that as well. So yeah, whatever the circumstances are, we can certainly handle it.
Well, Chris, it's been great having you with us. You mentioned that you do a podcast. Is it related to your business or for something else?
So when this pandemic started, we saw a group of us in our office saw a lot of businesses that were struggling. So what we did was we started this podcast to get some business owners from the area whose businesses were struggling, so they could get some exposure, restaurants and things like that, so that we could get the word out kind of in our little community of Grosse Pointe here. And it's been fun, and we've gotten to meet some great people and hopefully made some headway into saving these very important businesses, because without each other, this thing doesn't work. You know, we need businesses to serve, and communities need businesses to draw in people, and the whole thing is just a huge ecosystem, if you will. And so it's important, and me personally, it's important to me that others survive this thing, not just me.
That is a great lesson for all of us. We are all so interconnected. We are not alone. What we do impacts the next person and the next person and the next person, and that connection goes for full circle. And with that, what is the podcast if someone wants to listen? And is it on your website?
It is not on my website. However, it is on Google and Spotify and Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. It is called 81 Kirchable Beers with Business Owners.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, we keep it pretty light. I mean, we'll maybe have a couple of beers and talk about business, talk about some personal stuff so that people can get to know the people that are living and operating in their community. And it's just been really fun, and hopefully provided some help to some people.
What's the name again? Because I'm writing it down.
It is 81 Kirchable, which is our address where we are in Grosse Pointe. And it's called Beers with Business Owners.
That is great. Well, thank you for what you are doing, and we hope that you and everyone that works for you stays safe and healthy throughout this pandemic.
And same to you, Ronnie. Thank you for having me.
We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast. Still a lot to get to. When we come back, we'll shift the conversation just a little bit, and we will be joined with the Executive Director for the Michigan Gaming Control Board. This is the Oakland County Megacast.
Michigan, we still need to stay careful because we don't want to go backwards, back to where we started. So keep standing 6 feet apart. Keep wearing a mask in public. And if you have symptoms, talk to a healthcare provider about getting tested. To move forward, let's all do our part. So stay careful. Michigan.gov/coronavirus.
Hi, I'm Dr. Faust, the Medical Director for the Oakland County Health Division. The most important thing you can do to prevent the spread of illness is to wash your hands thoroughly and often. Follow these 6 easy steps every time you wash your hands. Step 1, turn on the sink and wet your hands with warm water. Step 2, apply soap to your hands and lather between your fingers, under your nails, and the front and back of your hands and wrists. Step 3, wash your hands by scrubbing them together for at least 20 seconds. Step 4, rinse your hands with warm, clean water. And Step 5, dry your hands with a clean cloth towel, a paper towel, or hot air blow dryer. If you're using a cloth towel, make sure to change it often. For handheld faucets, turn off the water using a paper towel instead of your bare hand. Step 6, if you're using a paper towel, throw it away. Practice healthy habits like washing your hands after coughing or sneezing into them to keep you and others healthy. Go to oakgov.com/health or call Nurse on Call at 1-800-848-5533 to learn more.
Great to have you with us on the Wednesday edition of the Megacast. As a reminder, you can always watch and listen. Civic Center TV, Birmingham Area Municipal Access. You can catch us on the TV, Channel 15, if you have Comcast, 99 on AT&T. You can also tune us into the radio, 89.3 Lakes FM, 88.1 FM, the Biff. We also want to say thank you today to the West Bloomfield Parks Department for allowing us to live stream today's edition of the Megacast on their Facebook page. And with that, let's join or bring in our next guest, Richard Kalm. He's the Executive Director for the Michigan Gaming Control Board. Let's keep the conversation going. And I will tell you what, a lot of people were very happy this last Friday. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
So as we all know, the state of Michigan is now allowing for online sports betting here in the state of Michigan. What exactly does that mean?
Not only online sports betting, but online casino games. We launched both simultaneously for most of the operators. And what that means is you're now able to bet on sports legally online on a mobile device or on a home computer. And also you can play casino style games on a mobile device or on a home computer.
So for years here in the state of Michigan, we've been kind of told this is bad, it's illegal. And you think back to the day where they were running numbers, right? Why the shift?
Well, the shift's been going on for 25 years or so. As gambling and casinos moved out of Nevada and went across the state, as you know, Michigan back in 1997, there was a referendum to allow gambling or casinos in the city of Detroit. And much of that was due to revenue to be generated by the city of Detroit. So there was a constitutional amendment. The voters passed it that allowed for 3 casinos in an area that had a certain amount of population. And so that kind of swept across the whole United States. Nevada, New Jersey, most states, great many states have, retail sites for casinos. So I think that softened people's tolerance of that. And we have, lottery and lotto is in multiple states. So there's a certain amount of gambling that the public tolerates. And as long as it can be done safely and in a regulated manner, without the influx of organized crime or money laundering or things of that nature, I think states embraced it as a way to garner revenue. And this is just taking it to the next level. We're not the only state that gambles online. There's multiple states that are doing it now. And I think it's maturing to a point where the casinos have realized that they have to move with the times in order to market to a whole different group of people, and that the younger generation of people may not visit a casino, but are very adept at using mobile devices. And so it's sort of, they've been talking about it for 6 or 8 or 10 years, and we're seeing it come to fruition in multiple states now. So it's sort of a progression.
What is going to be the bottom line for this with the revenue for the state of Michigan?
We don't know that yet. We can only look at other states like New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and that revenue is pretty substantial. I think that the tax rate on sports betting is 8.4%, so it's not cumbersome for the operators to have that tax rate. So it's going to bring a lot of business as far as sports betting to the state. And conversely, all the platforms do both, right? They do sports betting, and they also have a suite of games available for people who understand casino games and slots and things like that available. And that's where I think the revenue is going to be driven through, are those casino style games. That's where you're going to see most of the revenue.
So I remember back when the casinos were being built, and then they reopened, and they were really thought to be kind of the salvation, because, and then the lotto as well, with the revenue that went to the school system as well. But we discovered that's not the case. Is this another way of trying to get revenue in the state of Michigan's coffers?
Oh, absolutely. The casinos, the 3 Detroit casinos do about, when we're not shut down and there wasn't COVID, the last full year we had about $1.4 billion in revenue. And then the tribal casinos do just a little bit more than that with all the tribal casinos. So, it's almost a $3 billion industry for the retail side. Now, when you enter in the online side, I think you're going to see some substantial gains in revenue. And really, that's what this is about, is to offer a product to people legally through the casinos we already have licensed, right? We have 12 recognized tribes and 3 commercial casinos, and to regulate it so that it allows these casinos to market in a different way. It allows the citizens to have more opportunity to gamble. It allows the state to get tax revenue from that activity.
So you keep saying legal. There is a black market for this. Do you anticipate that it's going to continue? Because even though you regulate something and you make it legal, it doesn't mean the underground of the industry goes away, right?
Oh, no, I don't. I think there'll always be somewhat of a black market. We do have, we do conduct investigations and then triage those investigations to local police. We have, on-site strip mall casinos that are still operating. And there's, a great many websites that'll take bets offshore or play casino games offshore. You've all seen them on your phone. They advertise on Facebook, and that's illegal. I think what's going to happen is over time, the citizens, this state anyways, want to have a legal way of doing that. They want to use their credit card to open an account, not Bitcoin, not all these other alternative things. And so to do that, you've got to have a legitimate gaming operator, somebody that we regulate. In other words, we look in, if there's a patron complaint, we investigate it. If people think they've been ripped off, we also ensure there's a certain payback on random number generators. I don't want to get too technical, but there has to be a certain payback on casino games. We approve those games. The whole goal here is to make sure we protect the interests of the people of the state of Michigan. As a side note, we do collect taxes for that, and that's great for the state. But really our focus and why we exist is for that purpose, to make sure people don't get ripped off, and that there's a that this gaming is going to occur legally, that we make sure it's done the right way.
We're also in the middle of a pandemic and people are staying home. The casinos, as you mentioned, they've been shut down, but then they've also been under limited capacity. Do you think that by, starting this in the middle of a pandemic when so many people are at home, it's going to help foster some of the games that people play because they don't feel comfortable maybe going to the casino?
Well, yeah, the casinos are operating at right around 15 or 20% capacity. So they've been hobbled in their ability to bring in new people and gaming. You can't get amenities there, anything right now because of COVID. So I do think that the addition of online gaming will help normal patrons who normally would go to the casino will have the ability to do that. But I think the part that's most interesting here is not so much allowing people to gamble from home that normally would go to a casino. It's capturing a whole new demographic and market that the casinos really didn't have direct access to. People in the age group of 25 to 35 may not, they might go to a sporting event, they might go downtown, visit a casino when they go to a sporting event, but nobody does that not nobody, but as a great percentage won't go to downtown just to gamble. However, they're on their phones, they're playing fantasy sports, especially in the sports side already. And they're very adept at using their devices in all manner of ways. And this is just another way that they're going to be able to legally play Angry Birds for money, for lack of a better word.
So there's a backside of this, though, right? People do develop gambling addictions. What's being done to address that issue as we open up more gambling?
Right. Well, people are going to do what people do, and we have multiple ways to address that. We can't force people not to partake, whether they go to the casino and gamble, or whether they use their device online. But we have tools in place. All the operators and the platform providers were required by us to put certain safeguards in. There'll be a clock running right in front of your face when you are gambling on casino games or sports betting. There'll be you can set thresholds to how much money you put in your account, how much money you gamble per day. There's reminders that pop up. You've been on X amount of time. You've wagered this amount of money. So that's on the front end of it, on the GUI interface of it, to remind people what they're doing. Because, as you know, there's stories of people going to the casino and staying 24 hours and just gambling, like crazy. These things are in place right in front of you, right in your face. On top of that, a certain percentage of the taxes goes for problem gambling efforts. So advertising, when the public opens the app, they'll see a hotline number. And if you have a gambling problem, call this number. And then people can actually sign themselves off. They can just say, I'm not going to gamble for a year. And they can notify the app or the provider, and they will remove them from that for a period of time. On the retail side, we have the disassociated persons list, we call it, where people actually ban themselves from the casino. And previously it was for life. Now it's for a term up to 5 years, where they've said, please don't let me in the casino, arrest me for trespassing if I go in. These are obviously extreme cases. And we honor that. So there'll also be lists for each of the platforms that people want to put themselves on and ban themselves.
And with that, and obviously, if an individual really wants to gamble, they'll find a way around some of these safety measures that you put in place. But with that too, can we talk a little bit more about what does this mean for some of what you just mentioned, the strip club casinos, some of the small businesses that had the poker machines and some of these other types of devices in the strip malls or in the back of their businesses? What does this mean for them?
Well, those are all operating illegally, and we've seized a great many of them and charged individuals for operating illegally. And people say, well, what's the difference? You can buy lottery, you can gamble online. Well, those are unregulated machines. People are getting ripped off. They don't really realize it. And there's an organized crime factor in a lot of those that own those machines and then put them into bars, restaurants, and they split 50-50. We're aware of all that. I think this is going to hurt it, because if you can sit at Buffalo Wild Wings with your phone when the restaurants open up and place a bet or play a casino game right from your phone, why would you go to a strip mall casino? Why would you even get involved in that when it's right there conveniently in place for you? You can go anywhere with it.
So how does that actually work? So if a business wants to have 1 or 2 or 3 of these machines, can they do so now and maybe apply for a license? What's that look like?
No. nobody would be licensed to conduct any of this gaming unless they're one of the federally recognized tribes as an operator, 12 of them, or one of the 3 already licensed casinos. So you won't have devices showing up at bars and restaurants. The device will be carried in by the patron in his hand.
So it really is an interesting time. Can you tell us kind of what it's been like for you and some of the other people that work at the Gaming Control Board to try to get this initiative up and running, but also in the middle of a pandemic? Has it actually helped you in a way?
Yeah, in a way, I hate to say it, but in a way it did sort of help us focus our efforts. We didn't hire any additional personnel. We just couldn't. We had a hiring freeze on the state, so we had to adjust. People had to adjust within the agency. And then anytime we license somebody, we have to conduct a background investigation. In the past, we would travel to wherever that company was at. We would look at their records, their tax records, the CEO, so on and so forth. So that's where it became cumbersome for us with our inability to travel. So we had a lot of Zoom meetings, our investigators' Zoom meetings, calls in the middle of the night because, there's a time difference between overseas and here. So that was a little bit cumbersome. What happened here and what the sort of the silver lining of this is that there was a real spirit of cooperation. When in March, we started retail sports betting in the 3 commercial casinos, and in 3 days, it exploded. Everybody wanted it. It was great. And unfortunately, 3 days later, that we had to shut down all restaurants and government offices and everything shut down. So we knew there was a pent up demand. We shifted our focus right away to what had to be done were rule promulgation. So the law passed in December of 2019. We focused on retail sports betting, got them up in March, and then it became all about getting the rules done because according to our statute, we couldn't license the platforms, the app people that have the apps until the rules were completed. So we started licensing all that we could, doing the investigation, make sure they were suitable. And then simultaneously, we started negotiations and collaboration with the 12 tribes and with the 3 commercial casinos on rule sets. And we borrowed heavily from New Jersey and Indiana and Pennsylvania, who already had online gaming going, who already had many of these operators of platform providers that operate in that environment. So that helped expedite it. But I think the biggest thing is we were real surprised how when we did come up with our rule set, sent it out to the tribes and to the commercial casinos, how very little changes they asked for. And it really hit the bar and they all went, you know what, we got to get this done. There's going to be no arguing on small stuff. Let's go. And so it was full speed. And that's really what assisted us in getting this done quicker. Because we have, according in state government, you got to have public hearings when you do rules. It's got to go to the legislature. It's got to be approved at a whole bunch of different levels. And the biggest issue we thought we were going to have was trying to get these rules passed, the tribes and the commercial casinos and their attorneys. And that really went well. So all in all, the pandemic actually assisted us in getting that rule set done by December 2nd through the legislature. And then we started, as you see, we went live January 22nd. So 6 weeks later, we already went live. So a lot of work was done ahead of time, but the rules had to be done. It's kind of like, got to have the rules. And so that was expedited, I think.
So that's the upswing of the pandemic, right? Rick Kalm with us here on the Megacast. He's the executive director for the Michigan Gaming Control Board. And with that, Rick, if I'm a regular person and I'm going online, how can I know that one of the betting sites is actually one that's regulated through the state of Michigan or one of these offshore accounts that you were talking about earlier? Well,
it'll be pretty obvious because we have 15 operators. So you can go to the MGM Greektown casino site. Their app is listed there. You can go to any of the tribal casinos that are up and operating now. And the app right there at the casino website is the connection to the app. All the websites will say when you log on that this is a regulated site, Michigan Gaming Control Board, and it'll have all that. So you'll know. You won't be able to do it elsewhere. So unless you go to an offshore site that's clearly defined, people will see.
And do you anticipate this is also going to help the state of Michigan's bottom line because people maybe won't be traveling as much to Vegas and some of these other places to bet because, of course, it is a big football time right now with the Super Bowl coming up. And I know that previously, a lot of times people would go with a group of friends, go to Vegas, and they would be betting. But now they can do it right here in the state of Michigan.
They can do it in their living room with a bunch of people watching the Super Bowl, with their mobile device. So yeah, Detroit casinos were never really a travel destination for gambling like Vegas was. Vegas really leans heavily on the amenities and hotels and shows and things like that. That never really was the case so much in Detroit. We had a 75-mile market around those 3 commercial casinos, really where they pulled their people from. So this is opening up a whole new avenue. And you're right, we don't know what the revenue is going to be. We raced to try and get this up a week before, the playoffs. Playoffs were going on for football and March Madness, and so I guess we have to see. But it'll be much more convenient for people to conduct the activity, and they're going to be able to do it from the comfort of their home, hopefully safely and securely.
So I will say one thing, Rick, as someone that's a journalist, I know that, again, as I mentioned before, everyone thought the casinos would kind of be the salvation for our education system. That has not been. How can individuals or people track the revenues from this new online world and where that money is going?
You can just go to our website. We report revenues. Each of the platform providers will have to report revenues 10 days into the trailing month, the next month. I don't have those numbers for you now. We're so new to this thing, but all of our revenue and all the taxes that we assess on the commercial casinos are all posted on our website. Last year was a terrible year for that, but the year before, last full year we were operating about 165 million. I'm guessing off the top of my head, but I know I'm close. 165 million went to the school aid fund off the 3 commercial casinos. About 178 million. 100 above that, maybe 179 million went directly to the city of Detroit. So now the money garnered from this, from on the commercial side, there's 2 sides to this, right? There's the travel side, which we don't tax. They pay fees, and then there's the commercial side. So on the commercial side, out of the taxes that are generated, 30% of that tax is going to go directly to the city of Detroit. The rest is going to go into the school aid fund again. This revenue all goes back to either the city or the school aid fund for the most part. On the tribal side, most of it goes to tribal governments, and then they do share a portion of it with the local units of government around their casino. Revenue is going to be injected into the state by virtue of those mechanisms, and that all can be tracked on our website. And we report monthly to the department. We are part of the Department of Treasury, so that's all available to the public.
So with that, Rick, I will say I'm super cheap. When I go to Vegas, I want to ride the roller coaster that's in the one museum or the one casino and do some of those other things. Do they have penny bets?
Well, then you'll continue to go to Vegas when you can, because that's the amenities that would attract you there, right?
Right.
And they do have bets and pennies and dimes that you can play. So and I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm not a gambler myself, so I fit in well with this job, but I understand the process and how it works. And they have to be able to market and attract all levels, socioeconomic levels, in order to be successful. So yeah, they're going to have, you'll probably get a notice that you spent this many cents, and make sure you want to keep going, it'll flash in front of your app, but that's all available.
So I guess I won't be winning big on my penny bets anytime soon, but that's, we all play differently, that's for sure. Rick Kalm with us here on the Megacast. Quickly before I let you go, we appreciate your time, but maybe anything I didn't touch on that you want to share?
No, I can tell you a couple of things. One, you can now also place horse racing bets online through multiple betting apps. Northville Downs, their website has the apps that you can bet on, and we regulate that also. And we just did a quick check. We have a thing, when you open up your computer or your mobile device, we have what's called geolocation. So we can monitor to make sure you're in the state of Michigan, right? So we just took a capture over the weekend of those geolocation hits. In other words, people that have opened their app, certified that they're in the state, and then did some activity on it. And we were amazed. It's 750,000 contacts over the weekend, roughly, and it's really on pace, very close to New Jersey and Pennsylvania, who have been operating online gaming for quite a while. So that amazed me. To put it in perspective, the activity online with people with mobile devices was equaling what we were seeing in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And to us, that was amazing. Now, how that generated in the revenue, how many accounts were open and people put money on account and gambled, we just don't have that data yet. We probably won't. I asked them for a 14-day report, which is the first time, and I'll be able to report back on that after that 14-day period. So we'll see what it is.
Rick Kalm, we so appreciate your time here with us today.
Well, no problem. Glad you guys asked, and hopefully we're educating the public. It's a safe way to gamble online.
I've learned a lot just from this conversation, so I appreciate your time.
Great. Thank you.
You're listening to 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake, 88.1 WBFH Bloomfield Hills. We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast.
Michigan, the coronavirus pandemic has put us all to the test. And now it's time to put COVID-19 to the test. As we move forward, testing will be critical. We encourage anyone who has reason to get tested to do so, those with symptoms and those without. If you are leaving home and going back to work, get tested. If you think you may have COVID-19 or you've been exposed recently through family, friends, or coworkers, get tested. Our test locator tool can help you find the right testing site that fits your needs. Even if you're looking for easy access with no cost, no prescription, and no appointment necessary, we've got you covered. Help Michigan move forward, not backward. To find a testing site or learn more, visit michigan.gov/coronavirus test. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
The only way to beat COVID-19 is to face it.
You can't get too comfortable.
You can't forget the danger.
Wear the mask. Wear the mask.
Wear the mask. Wash your hands.
Keep a safe distance.
Especially in the next few months.
You know we'll get back to normal.
We'll get back to normal. We'll get back to normal.
Someday.
But not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But not yet.
But not yet.
Consider virtual gatherings for the holidays.
Curbside food orders.
Grocery delivery.
And shopping local.
Shop local.
And especially shopping local.
Let's beat this virus. We can if we face it together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together. Together.
For the latest information, visit oakgov.com/COVID.
We appreciate you taking time out of your Wednesday to tune in with us here on the Megacast. As always, you can catch us on Civic Center TV, Birmingham Area Municipal Access. If you have cable, Channel 15 on Comcast, 99 on AT&T. We also want to say thank you because a portion of your cable fee helps support programming such as this. You can also tune us in to the radio in your car if you're out driving around, or if you still have one of those old school transistor radios laying around. 89.3 Lakes FM, 88.1 FM The Biff. We also want to say thank you to the West Bloomfield Parks Department for allowing us to live stream today's edition of the Megacast on their Facebook page. And so with that, we'll kick off the second hour. Excited to bring in our next guest, Heather Zara. Is it Zara or Zara? Zara, like the clothing store.
Yeah, Zara, like the clothing store. Actually, funny story about that. I used to pronounce it Zara for the longest time when I was actually an on-air reporter. And then when I started my business, we kept getting all these calls, because the store, Zara, even before we had a location in Michigan, we would get calls. Are you the Zara? Do you have a size 9, shoe in this model? And we would just start laughing. But after a while, we were like, you know what? Zara does sound better, doesn't it? So we just kind of made a switch. And I don't know who else has experience with changing the pronunciation of their own last name, but let me tell you, very interesting experience when you first do it, because I kept saying, hello, this is Heather Zara. I mean, Zara, I don't know. Hi, but nice to see you. Nice to meet you.
You know what you should really do is play with people and make it Zara Zara.
Zara Zara, right? Well, I also thought okay, so for example, if your name was Sarah and you were Sarah Zara, that would be interesting. So I was like, okay, we'll just make it Zara. That way Sarah, the Sarahs of the world can be Sarah. It was very confusing. But yeah.
Well, Heather, it's great to have you with us. She's the owner and the CEO for Zara Creative. It's interesting though, but you have a media background. Before we get into what you're doing now, tell us about your background and how it helped you make this leap into the new world.
Yeah. Okay. So my background is really all in communication, specifically video production. I've basically been editing videos together since I was like 13 years old. So this is a lifelong, passion and a skill that I've kind of kept building upon. So I've been a communicator basically my whole life. My parents are actually immigrants, and they were born in Iraq, and they both immigrated here separately before they met. But they had a really unique choice in that they wanted us to really be like all-American and live the all-American, dream, the all-American life, whatever that meant for them, which was really heavily rooted in opportunity. And one of the decisions that they made when raising my brother and I was that they didn't teach us Arabic or Chaldean, their native languages, because what they wanted was they wanted us to really be like fully immersed in the American experience. So I really appreciate their mindset at the time. But one of the challenges and also one of the foundations of my very life, what I've built upon, is this concept that the people who raised me, and myself, we didn't actually speak the same first language, which is really interesting, right? Like, English is their third language. They're fluent in it, and they're amazing. My dad was actually going to be an English professor when he was studying in Iraq. He's not that anymore, but anyway. So I'm fascinated by how people communicate. I had to get really creative with how I communicated certain things growing up in my house, because certain things just don't translate, right? So little did I know, until years upon, after reflecting just kind of on my own personal story, how much that really laid the foundation for my passion, which is communication, finding easier ways to communicate with each other, finding ways to communicate with each other that helps heal ourselves, instead of making kind of reinforcing some of these old assumptions about what we think others are thinking or feeling. So I think communication is one of the most important pillars, whether you're in media or you're a professional communicator for a living or not. I mean, if you just, are stuck in your house, much like most of us have been for, 2020, if you live with others, you have to still have really strong communication skills with anyone in your life. So for me, communication is a huge passion. And that's kind of where it began for me, why I wanted to become a storyteller. My professional background starts as a sports reporter. That's basically what I was, went to school for. I've got a journalism degree from Michigan State. And I had been a sports reporter since I was pretty young. I got my first gig at like 19, started a TV show at Michigan State, won an Emmy Award for that, which is kind of fun as a 20-year-old student. And I just had a passion for storytelling. Shortly after that, when I was in college, I interned at an ABC station in Lansing. I interned at Fox 2, which I know you have a background at Fox 2, I loved that TV station, by the way.
I hope my husband wasn't too tough on you. Did he make you earn the letters of your name?
Oh my gosh, I don't know about that, but I loved working with Woody. I loved working with Woody Woodruff, that whole sports team at Fox 2. Dan Miller, Jennifer Hammond, Ryan Romani, these people were like such a core foundation, and actually a big part of, kind of why I started Zara Creative, and some of the beautiful cultural moments that they had such a strong culture in that sports department. And it was so refreshing to see that kind of a bond, because I don't know, the news industry isn't exactly, in my experience, wasn't exactly the most like warming and welcoming. It's a little bit cutthroat. There's like, 4 positions in each, role in every city. And so it's difficult. It's challenging to get a job in the field. So it always felt a little bit cutthroat and competitive, but the Fox 2 fam always made me feel at home. So that was cool. More recently, then I then went to Channel 4. I was a reporter there for almost 4 years. And when I was reporting there, I then took the leap to work for the Detroit Pistons to focus more on sports. I was doing mostly like traffic and sports at Channel 4. I loved working at Channel 4. I got so much beautiful experience from there. But one of the things was they really needed me to be a traffic reporter. I'm not a traffic reporter. I'm not a traffic reporter. I'm a storyteller. So with traffic, there's not a whole lot of storytelling. There's not a whole lot of inspiration. There's not a whole lot of sharing. And for me, my why is always, I like to share my stories and other stories so that others can find clarity and see themselves more clearly so they could do the work that they were meant to do here. Like, I think we all have a mission. And so it wasn't fulfilling for me. So I went to the Detroit Pistons, and I was a sports reporter there for the team. It was just a really unique time. It was 2011. So let's go back 10 years in time. And I had been working for the team for about 6 months. And all of a sudden the NBA went into a lockout. So I don't know how many people remember that time, but it felt eerily familiar to 2020 when I got the first news that the world was shutting down from COVID. My first news was hearing one of the NBA players getting COVID. And it was very reminiscent. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Anyway, at that time, I feel that sometimes when things kind of start shutting down and it looks like we have blocks in front of us, I actually think that those become sometimes the thing that needed to happen in order for something else to be created. So my business was really created from a period of a similar period of like a standstill, similar to what we experienced together as a world in 2020 in March, right? So here I am, I'm working for this team, I'm there for 6 months, and the NBA goes into a lockout. At that time, I can accredit this, upon reflection, looking back at that time. I'm so grateful I was there for that short period, because if I wasn't, I wouldn't have met the now owner, Tom Gores, of the Detroit Pistons. But because I worked there and he bought the team during that time, I was able to meet that group. I was able to meet Tom and his colleagues, right? So I was kind of in the mix. Looking back, that was a very pivotal, like, right place, right time. I still work with Platinum Equity, Tom Gores, and the Detroit Pistons to this day. So that was like kind of serendipitous. But at that time when the lockout was happening, I was kind of looking around and going, I have no players to interview. I have nothing to do. I'm going to work every day and I don't have a purpose, right? So at this point when all of this was happening, I was 27 years old. So a lot of my friends were getting married. So every time I would log on to Facebook, I would see engaged, right? So that's in the back of my head, right? I'm taking stock of what's happening in the world, in my world. NBA's locked down, okay? Don't know when that's gonna come back. And I just left the news industry, the news world, which I'd been in for about 8 years at that point, and I started this new venture. All these things are kind of floating in my head. Keeping in mind, I wasn't exactly the person who was like dreaming of their wedding day when they grew up. I'm not married still to this day, which is fine. No, nothing against marriage. I think people who choose to get married, it's a beautiful thing. But I wasn't exactly like wedding, obsessed or anything. But all these things were kind of happening. I go over to a friend's house during this time and watch their wedding video. I'd never seen a wedding video before this day. I just assumed in my mind that they looked like something, your Uncle Joe gets a camcorder and he's shooting the things and boop, boop, bop, and there's a toast and there's a whatever. So I'm watching their wedding film and I'm watching, and it's beautiful. It's storytelling, it's cinematic. It gave me the chills. I was super into it. And as a person who's not that into weddings, naturally I was drawn. I was like, what is happening? This is what a wedding video is? Immediately when I watched that, it was like literally gut reaction. I thought to myself, I could do that. And I thought I could do it better because at the time, 27, egomaniac, right? Like, I just thought I could do everything. Sometimes that little boost of ego kind of helps, at the time. So back then I thought to myself, it was like literally, I don't think I thought about it more than that 15 minutes. The idea got into my head. I started researching and I was like, oh my gosh, I could totally start my own company and I could totally work with small businesses and I can work with these brides and I know all these people who are getting married every 5 seconds and this will be good. And I didn't think about it very long and I just started planning. And that's kind of the long story short of how I started my business. I was really present to all the weird stuff that was happening around me. I took all these random, seemingly unconnected things, and I somehow connected the dots. And then I think here's the one thing that actually allowed me to leap was I had belief in myself. Like, you know, we were listening to the last person that you had on the show talking about betting. And the first thing that came to me was betting on yourself. And I think the one thing that I can toot my horn for and say that I've done really well, and I think every entrepreneur who actually does their own thing and still has their own thing, is you bet on yourself. Like, you bet on yourself, you bet on your skills, you bet on what you know you can do. And I know I can communicate. I know that I've built my entire life on this foundation, and I also trust myself. So I don't think I'm magical. I think what happens is we all have this gut reaction. We have this thing in our belly that talks to us. And I think most of us let fear talk us out of it. I just don't let that fear talk me out of it. Instead, I work with it. And I say, you know what? I know you're here, but I'm just going to go bet on myself anyway. And I'm going to do this thing because it just eats at me if I won't. So that's the long story short of how I started the business. We do not do weddings anymore. I eliminated that portion of the business about 5-6 years ago. So we work with global lifestyle brands. We work with a lot of awesome brands here in Detroit locally. And really, we want to work with brands who are concerned with elevating our experience here as human beings. So any brand that is looking to, have a product or service that elevates our life, elevates our experience as human beings, we want to work with them. So we're really fortunate. We work with awesome brands like Apple, the Detroit Pistons, the City of Detroit, which is not a brand, but they're,
Oh no, they're a brand. I can tell you, you want to talk about someone who has reshaped the narrative around the city of Detroit?
Totally.
Mayor Duggan, because before
Absolutely.
when I used to travel, it was like, oh my gosh, you're from Detroit. Now it's like,
you're
oh
right.
God, you're from Detroit. I hear great things about Detroit. It's coming
Totally.
back. And I'm like, come with me for a day.
Totally. And Mayor Duggan, you're totally right, is such a huge reason for that. I mean, he represents so fully like the types of humans that we love working with, people that here's a good Mayor Duggan story. One of the things he shared with us was, we want to lead with light. We don't want to lead with fear. And I just think, especially after the last 4 years, what a beautiful message and how much he's really stuck to that. Like,
Heather, I have stories about him that do not share that perspective, but we'll leave that for another time.
Totally.
Because he definitely leads by fear for so many people. But with that, I thought the video, I was on your website earlier, the video you did with Chief Craig was beautiful, and how it was told, and his tone and how he did it was very well told. And it was just that a story as well. But when we're talking about that too, what's it been like? You take this leap, now you have a new business and it's being successful, but then we go into a pandemic. And one thing about video production and your videos, they're very touching. Like, you can see not just the smile on the face, but the light in their eyes. So how has that changed how you're filming in the middle of the virus? Did you have to take a pause at all?
So as I'm thinking about that question, so for me in my story, the moments that are like the shocking ones, like the moments where it feels like the world shut down or like something happened. So like, for example, I started my business during an NBA lockout, and I worked for an NBA team, right? So like at the time, my world was like shut down, when this pandemic happened, you want my honest, here's kind of the order of my gut reactions. One, human fear arose because the whole world shut down. And I was like, what is happening? Just like everyone else, I had fears. Second thing that's going into my awareness is the business. What am I going to do about the business? The beauty is I'm, when this happened, I was almost 10 years into running my own company. So when you run your own company, guess what? Things happen. Lots of weird things come at you. So this was not my first experience with something, major. The truth is, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs share this, is I actually, when moments like that happen, I recognize them as key pivotal moments. And I think we have two options. We can look at it as, doom and gloom and destruction, or we can look at it as an opportunity to pivot And the truth is our company vision has always been to expand. We've always been a global minded company. We're obsessed with travel. So part of our company vision was building in this remote model, the ability to create stories and edit and work with directors and crews from really anywhere in the world. Part of that was my own desire to not want to be fully rooted in one place. I think I'm kind of like a bumblebee in the fact that I like to kind of buzz around, and that's how I get my inspiration and my creativity. So the interesting thing is this set us up and forced us to figure out ways of pivoting quicker than, the big picture vision was planning. I was planning on expanding to Los Angeles, Denver, years in the a couple of years down the road. This forced us to think a little bit quicker. So everything is digital. We actually have been working so well as a team remotely that about 3 months into working remote with the pandemic, we immediately decided to lease out our office space in Ferndale, which is beautiful. We have 5,500 square feet of, completely custom designed spaces. It's gorgeous. I spent a lot of my time and energy on that building, prior to COVID. But I think sometimes as an entrepreneur and just in general, you have to really be present to what's happening and make decisions like quickly and not overthink them. And that was another kind of gut reaction that came to me. I said, let's list it. So called real estate agent, we listed the space, and we actually have someone renting out our building until September 1st, which is awesome. So that was one thing that we did because we have a really aligned values, aligned team and super experienced. Everyone's really talented. I'm so grateful I had them on the team going into the pandemic. We ended up actually growing by 2. We hired 2 people to our team during the pandemic. In terms of the actual functionality of video production, the beauty is when the pandemic first started, we had a ton of projects to edit. So from post-production, we were mostly focused on post-production. So that was kind of beautiful from a timing standpoint to give us some time to think. In terms of adjusting, it happened once spring kind of hit, and the summer we were shooting a lot outside, obviously mask, taking all the CDC precautions necessary, and we're shooting again. So we've been shooting. Everyone is masked up. We take all the proper procedures. We make sure that everyone is feeling well. I actually had a don't come to work sick rule pre-COVID. This was always like part of our values. Like we just care about people more than profits. It's just who we are. And so I would always say, if you're not feeling well, just take the day, be human, take care of yourself. So kind of bizarre that some of our practices actually kind of alluded to this kind of new world that we live in. And it's actually another weird thing. So we travel a lot for work, right? And we'll do shoots in London. We were supposed to have a ton of shoots in Europe in 2020. And what we ended up doing is, this beautiful tool that we're speaking on right now, Zoom, is kind of magical. It's a little magical. Right now, we're in each other's spaces and we're in our own. So I conducted like 3 interviews in London just from here. So it's interesting, because we have a dynamic network of amazing, talented people from all around the world. We'll call those crews that know how we work. And I basically set it up so that we're directing it. And I'm like, okay, so position laptop, where I would be sitting, and it just works. So I think that obviously no one wants to see us in a global pandemic. No one wants to see, our fellow human beings getting sick and dying. Nobody wants that. But I think that one of the things that this brought to light is that just how little control we do have of external things, and that's never going to go away. We never will have control of what's happening in the outside world. But what we do have control of is ourselves, how our mindset is organized, how we're listening to ourselves, and how we pivot, and how we, allow the fear to be there, but we utilize that fear almost to alchemize it into something that pushes us forward. So I think that this pandemic has given us kind of an opportunity to perhaps do things differently, to do things more efficiently, to also so one of the things that I'm really, really big on is culture, creating really beautiful cultures that bring out the best in us instead of these environments, workplaces that, bring out the worst in us. And I think for most of society, we work at places that don't bring out the best in us. And so if working from home and this extra layer of flexibility provides more value to our team members, I'm all about it. If in the future they want to work from home like 3 days a week, 4 days a week, whatever they want. And this has proved to us that we can be efficient. We can manage our time in unique ways, and we can really still create magic even when we're not together. So I think that this has given us an opportunity to think more entrepreneurially, even if you're not one. And I might have made up my word there.
You know, and that is so true for so many people right now during this time. They're realizing that the way they used to live is not how they want to continue to live, and they want to chase those dreams. Heather, it's been great having you with us here on the show.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to see you be so successful. It's so great. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I want to meet your parents one day. Are they still in the area?
Oh, I like that. Yes, they both are.
Oh, that's great. I'd love to hear their story. With us, Heather Zara. She's the owner and CEO for Zara Creative. Best of luck to you and your team going into 2021. We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast. And when we come back, the author of The Invisible Men, we'll talk to him when the Oakland County Megacast continues.
Perry tested positive for COVID-19. Emma was exposed to a friend who's positive. Willa's waiting on test results. After any contact with COVID-19, or if you test positive, stay home for at least 10 days. If you live with others, keep your distance and wear a mask. Help Michigan contain COVID-19. Visit michigan.gov/contain-COVID.
COVID-19 has caused many families to fall behind on finances and on groceries, but you're not alone. You shouldn't have to worry about putting food on the table. MyBridges offers access to quality food and income assistance to help families across the state get the food support they need. It's easy to apply and easy to start shopping. Apply for services at michigan.gov/MIBridges. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Michigan, we're calling on you to save lives. Don't ignore it. Don't let it go to voicemail. It's urgent. In fact, it's critical. Because if you've been in close contact with someone who tests positive for COVID-19, you may have been exposed to the virus. And you could get a call from My COVID Help or your local health department. So please answer the call to learn how to protect yourself, your family, and friends. We're calling on you to stop the spread of COVID-19, to make it safe to reopen businesses and help Michigan move forward. So if you get a call from My COVID Help or your local health department, you may have been exposed to someone with COVID-19. To protect us all, answer the call. Learn more at michigan.gov/contain-COVID. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
We appreciate you taking time out of your day to be with us here on the Megacast. And as Heather was just saying, she likes to communicate with people and their stories, but there's another genre of storytelling as well, and that is in the form of comic books. With us now, we are going to bring in Ken Quattro. He is the author of Invisible Men. I absolutely love your book and telling history through comics. Tell us a little bit more about this book and how you went about writing it.
Well, great. Well, thank you for having me on, Ronnie. I've always been a comics fan going back many, many years. And I've written hundreds, if not thousands of articles and contributed to movies and books and everything about comics, and particularly comics history. And what I mean by that is I'm interested in the creators who actually create the comic books, not just the characters, but the actual people, the artists and the writers who create the comics. Well, about 20 years ago, I was interested in writing an article about a man named Matt Baker. Well, the only two things known about Matt Baker at the time were that he had died young and that he was a black man. And he was considered to be, by many people, the only black comic book artist who had worked in the 1940s. which is when comics really became popular. Well, that struck me as really odd because statistically that made no sense at all. How could there only be one Black person, working in an industry? Anyway, I spent many years trying to track down information about Mr. Baker. And finally, someone told me to contact this retired Black cartoonist in Philadelphia named Samuel Joyner. Well, Mr. Joyner, I found his address and I wrote him a letter asking for information if he knew anything at all about Matt Baker. Well, I've done, like I said, research many, many times for many articles, and most of the time you get no response when you contact people blindly like this because they're hesitant, to just, provide personal information about anything. Well, Mr. Joyner wrote back a 4-page letter, a beautiful 4-page letter. And he not only described his personal experience meeting Matt Baker, but all these other Black artists that he'd known. And he sent me newspaper articles and clippings about these different artists. Well, some of them worked in comic books, which is my specialty, but others were just cartoonists. Well, I was stunned at this information because as much as I knew about comics, I'd never heard of a lot of these men. So I wrote him back immediately and we developed like a relationship, and he gave me a little bit more information. And then I went from there. I tried to find more personal information about specific artists that he had mentioned. Well, none of the newspapers that I looked into, which I normally look into, the archives and, for newspapers like the News and the Free Press and the New York Times and stuff like that, had any information about any of these men, nothing. And I thought that was really curious that there was no information at all about these artists, because usually you can find information about people who have exhibitions or where they went to school or something like that when you start researching people like artists. Well, there's nothing about any of these men. So it struck me as I said, well, what about looking in Black media? So I started looking for Black newspapers. And unfortunately, the libraries in schools have never been good about retaining Black newspapers for information. And there was hardly any that I could find. I would find runs of maybe a week or two or a couple weeks worth of newspapers, but no cohesive database of Black information. So long story short, I spent 15 years locating all these newspapers and magazine articles and books. And it turns out that there was many more Black comic book artists. And in the Black media, a lot of these men were celebrated as fine artists. They'd come from fine art backgrounds. They'd been classically trained artists. And they just happened to have worked in comic books during the 1940s as basically a way to feed their families. And, it took, like I said, it took me 15 years to put this all together and find out that there was a blind spot that we had in our historical perspective about, the work of Blacks in comic books.
It really is fascinating because history is told through the eyes of those that document it. And when you can't find that documentation, those stories can go away. So with that, Ken, during your research, what did you learn about some of these artists?
Well, like I said, Ronnie, each one, there's 18 artists I profile in this book, and they're probably the 18 most well-known of the Black artists. Each one of them had a particular fascinating story. Like, for instance, there's one man named Elmer Stoner, and he had been one of the artists during the Harlem Renaissance. He was a painter, and he'd been classically trained in Europe. He studied in the French Academy and everything. And in 1922, he came back from Paris and he settled in Harlem. And he actually participated in the very first exhibition of Black artists in the United States. It was held at the Harlem Library in 1922. And he became a very important figure in the whole Harlem Renaissance movement during the 1920s. Well, he had a relatively successful career working in white mainstream media as an illustrator, but come the 1930s, like a lot of artists, he found himself out of work because of the Great Depression. So he was the first Black artist, and I should say acknowledged Black artist, who ended up working in comic books in 1939. And again, he did it because they were only getting paid like $2 or $3 per page for doing this artwork, but it was a way of feeding, his family. And Mr. Stoner ended up being a conduit for other Black artists who entered the field after him. He would help them get jobs and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and I said, he's just one. Yeah, he's just one of each one of these guys had a unique story like that.
And you think now, like if you could find a page of that original art, how much would be worth, right?
You see behind me, Ronnie, all this is original art, comic book artwork on the wall. Most of it's from that time period. So some of it does exist, but it's very, very rare,
Were you able to find out anything about how they were treated during that period and how they were paid compared to some of their white counterparts?
Well, here's what's interesting about it, Ronnie. I have to back up a little tiny bit here. In the 1930s, the Roosevelt administration created the Works Progress Administration, the WPA. And the whole purpose of that was to give artists who were unemployed jobs, just work, give them something to do. And they ended up doing things like painting murals on post offices and working at the World's Fair and stuff like that. Well, around 1939, 1940, it was defunded by Congress. And most of the artists who worked for the WPA were minority artists, like Black and Jews. So all these artists found themselves without work. So what they did, they took whatever work they could find. And again, the comic book industry at the time was booming. Superman was created in 1938, and that just set the entire industry off. It was expanding like crazy. And what the comic book industry was interested in was just production. They just wanted as much material as they could. They didn't care what it looked like. They just wanted it done. So to feed that, feed that need, there was a thing created called comic shops. They were comic studios, and they were led by a guy who was called a packager. And he would go to the publisher of a comic book company, get the job, and they would say, like, we need 2 comic books by next week. And he would take it back, and he'd have a studio set up where it'd be all just lined up with tables, drawing tables, and a whole room full of artists. And these guys were getting paid like $2 a page. And they would crank out these comic books as fast as they could. They didn't care what they looked like. They just wanted them as fast as they could get them done. Well, the advantage for Black artists with these comic studios is that they didn't have to interact with white publishers, because what they could do is they would get an assignment from this packager. They would take it home and draw it in their own studio at home. Because several of these artists I've read, they said anytime they would go into a publisher on their own, they would never get an assignment. So what they would do is they would work through these packagers who provided a buffer between them and the actual publisher. But what happened by them working this way, Ronnie, is that many of the white artists in the studios never knew they were working with Black artists, because the Black artists physically would not be in the studio. And they were invisible to them. And that's what created, for me, that's where I came up with the title Invisible Men, because they were actually invisible even to the people they were working with. So their pay scale was no different, but they weren't getting paid much at all. Like I said, $2 a page is nothing, even at that time.
Wow, it really is fascinating, and the research that you've done on this issue and in diving into their stories. What's one of the biggest discoveries that you made during your research?
Well, probably the thing that struck me most, Ronnie, like I said, I've always had a fascination with history, and I thought I knew quite a bit about history. But as I started researching for this book and I started reading Black newspapers, I realized that there's other perspectives to history. Like you mentioned, you touched on, we had to see history from one perspective. And in this country, it's the white media perspective. But by reading the Black newspapers, I read thousands of them over, this 15 years here. you see American history through an entirely different lens. And you're seeing events, the same events, covered in an entirely different way, like the 1943 Detroit riots. You know, you look at it through the white lens. I don't know if you've ever heard much about them, but it was considered that the blacks were rioting, and, you know, the police arrested mostly the blacks and stuff, and there was something like 20 black men killed. But if you read it through the black media, what had happened is that it was a white group of white guys who attacked a black group, but the ones who ended up getting in trouble were the blacks. So it was over and over again, you get this different perspective. Like I told people, I said, I was almost ashamed in reading this because there's so much I didn't know. And you see things from an entirely different perspective. And, you know, it was eye-opening for me. And that's what I try to get across in this book here, is to try to show people, you know, there's other ways of looking at things. There's not just one way of looking at something, you know, there's multiple ways of seeing things.
And that's such a valuable lesson, even today. So I know that your book was published just this past December, right? So what's it been like for you? Because how do you get out and try to do book signings during the middle of a pandemic?
It's been crazy, Ronnie. I mean, see, usually, like I said, I've written many things, and it's a very niche kind of field that I write for, you know, just comic book fans. But this has gone crazy. I mean, the New York Times picked it up. I got a full-page article in the New York Times on January 3rd. Then the Free Press ran a full-page article about the book. And the media on this has been insane. I mean, literally almost on a daily basis, I'm getting calls from all over the country. I actually did an interview in the Philippines last week. You know, but so I have to do everything over, you know, the internet, which is kind of strange for me. I'm a very reserved, private person, and to do this kind of stuff is kind of strange. You know, I'm used to working by myself as a writer, and it's just a very strange experience, you know, to have to do all this now.
So with that, if someone is interested in purchasing the book, how can they do so?
Well, Amazon is the most obvious way. I mean, but every book retailer has it. And personally, I would prefer if they would try to purchase it from a small business if they could, particularly like comic shops who are really suffering, you know, right now, you know, and most comic shops carry it and be, you know, you'd be doing them a favor if you would order through them. If I could just show the cover real quick. I hate to do it, but my publisher loves when I plug the book like this.
No, absolutely. I have to tell you, Ken, my husband's upstairs, so I hope he's not watching this. He's an avid comic book collector, to the point where I'm like, we bought our house based on him having a comic book collection. But with that, this is going to be his Valentine's gift. So
great. Very good.
But yeah, they know him well at the comic book shops here in Metro Detroit. But I love the book. But I love the history and the stories behind it as well. It's been great having you on with us.
Well, thank you, Ronnie. I appreciate it.
We wish you continue success with the book. It's so many important stories, and I'm glad that you took the time to do the research and to share these stories as well.
Thank you.
Ken Quattro with us here. He is the author, Invisible Men. You can find the book on Amazon. We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast, and when we come back, we are going to round out the show with our favorite professor, Professor Dulio from Oakland University. This is the Oakland County Megacast.
Hi, my name is Kurt Lawson, and I'm the Public Information Officer for West Bloomfield Township. We wanted to reach out to you, our older adults, to provide information that you may find useful during this difficult time. We want to ensure you that West Bloomfield Town Hall, our Waters and Utility Department, West Bloomfield Parks, and our police and fire departments continue to work hard on your behalf. Information and resources can be found on the Township website, the police Facebook and Twitter, or call West Bloomfield Parks COVID-19 Help Hotline. Please remember to keep your social distance of at least 6 feet, wear facial coverings when you leave your home, and wash your hands for at least 20 seconds with soap. These precautions will help keep you safe during these difficult times.
This may seem uncomfortable, but so is being hooked to an IV, sleeping in a hospital bed, and fighting for your life. When it comes to COVID-19, comfort is not as important as saving lives. Wearing a mask can greatly reduce the chance of spreading the virus. So mask up, Michigan, every time you leave home.
Great to have you with us here on the Megacast, just about 15 minutes in the show. And of course, tonight, Governor Gretchen Whitmer will be delivering her third State of the State address, but it's going to be a bit different this year as she will not be doing it in front of some of the lawmakers. But to talk about that and all things politics, let's go ahead and bring in our favorite professor, Professor Dave Dulio of Political Science and the Director for the Center for Civic Engagement over at Oakland University. Great to have you with us again, Professor.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I would anticipate tonight the governor's address, really nothing new is going to come out of it.
I would probably agree with that. I think that we've seen both the governor and the legislature in the last couple of weeks lay out some plans for COVID relief. But given that that is what is rightly so dominating our world, right? That I would be surprised if she veered terribly far off of that path.
Seems like we've forgotten all about the roads. You know, you take something that was such, really a cornerstone of her campaign, and then you throw in a pandemic and it just goes away. We forgot about the roads.
I mean, the best laid plans can get tossed out the window pretty quick, and that's what we saw happen. I read this morning that the governor has said that she hasn't forgotten about the roads, and I believe that, right? I mean, it just there are bigger fish to fry at the moment, I think.
Yeah, and with that, hopefully at some point in time, we're going to start to see the two political parties come together. I will say, no surprise, of course, with Donald Trump and the, his impeachment, we knew that the Republicans were not going to vote to get this passed. So, you're looking at that and some people do wonder, why did you even go with it? But I think the bigger thing to come out of this is really the future of the Republican Party. How are they going to go forward from this point on?
I think that's a great question. In terms of impeachment, I think that if there were going to be Republicans who voted to, let's use the word convict, right? Even though we're not talking about a real trial here. We're not talking about a judicial exercise. Impeachment is a political exercise, right? So I think we don't do ourselves any favors when we use terms that were more familiar to us when we are thinking about a judicial activity, right? But having said that, that's the parlance, so we can use it, right? But if Republicans were going to vote to convict Donald Trump, I think it would have been immediately after January 6th. The further we get from that, I think the less likely that outcome becomes. I also think it becomes more likely, to your point, that more in the public look at it and go, okay, he's out of office. What are we doing here? We need to get to getting people vaccinated. We need to get to the president's next round of COVID relief package, right? It just becomes, I think, a more difficult sell to a lot of people the further away we get.
Yeah, because you do almost understand it in those days right after. And it is going to be interesting to see if the Democrats continue to push the issue and talk about this issue, if it is going to alienate some members of the public for just what you mentioned. We're in the middle of the pandemic. He's out of office. And I think the surprising thing, we haven't heard from Trump since he left office.
Right. Well, great. So much in there to unpack, right? And I think you make so many good points. Let's start with that. I think Twitter, frankly, did Republicans a big favor by eliminating him from that platform. Nobody hears from him now, right? So, and what was, you could make a strong case that the Trump churn on a daily basis was really what made our politics for so many years, right? Without that, Now, Trump is still an issue, no doubt about it. And Democrats are going to continue to make him an issue because it works, right? In terms of whether or not they're alienating anybody, frankly, the way we've been going, even in the first, 7 days of the Biden administration, I don't see a whole lot of coming together. I see a whole lot of continued polarization. And let's be honest about it, Democrats aren't going to worry about Republicans as long as they've got enough independents with them to have a sort of a governing majority, right? If they've got enough Democrats and independents on their side, they'll forget about the Republicans.
I would like to get your thoughts on the use of the executive order. Obviously, we've seen it used a lot here in the state of Michigan, but we've also are now seeing it with Biden. He made quite the show of some of his executive orders. And you kind of wonder, when it comes to the executive orders, what about the process? What about the process of, having a separation of these branches of government?
Right. I'm so glad you asked about that, because this is something that is a pet peeve of mine, right? And it really has to do with hypocrisy. And no surprise here, right? Hypocrisy abounds when we talk about politics. But both sides need to figure out what they really think about executive power, right? When one party is in control and has the governor's mansion or the presidency, they don't see it as a problem. As soon as the other side gets it, it's the worst thing. Right? It's, oh my gosh, how can the president do this? How can the governor do this? It's all executive. Well, a month ago, it was a different story, right? At the federal level. So Democrats are now all about Joe Biden using executive power when they absolutely hated it when Donald Trump did it. Right? So it's not so much about the power, it's about the policies, right? And to your question, right? These executive orders at the federal level, they are written solely by White House staff, obviously with input from the president and his team. But that is a purely executive function that has very little check in terms of the wording of those orders. Now, the orders at the federal level are much more limited in scope because they can't contradict current law. And in fact, we even saw the other day, one of those executive orders gets stopped by a court. So that's also nothing new, right? President Trump saw a number of his executive orders challenged and thrown out in court over his 4 years in office. And Joe Biden is finding that right now.
So what is the future of our politics? You have the pulse on the younger generation. What are they saying right now?
Well, I think the students that I come in contact with are a lot like everybody else, right? They just want it to work. They want it to be effective and efficient government that solves problems that the country's facing. And nobody likes the bitter partisanship, the polarization, the bickering, the gridlock. But frankly, the way the start of the Biden administration doesn't give me a whole lot of hope that we're going to break that logjam anytime soon.
He was supposed to be the one to bring the country together and to bring the two sides together, because one thing about Biden, he's been in this system long enough to know how it works.
Absolutely.
So why isn't he doing it?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I would love to be a fly on the wall in the Oval Office or the Cabinet Room when those meetings are taking place to really know what the calculus is. I think you're exactly right. For not just his inaugural speech, but he promised throughout the campaign to be the one to bring the country together, right, and to have this unity. Well, and just yesterday I read that some of his statements are backing off that a little bit, right? Where he said something to the effect of, well, you can have unity even if you've got a vote in Congress that falls along partisan lines. Well, that seems like a backtrack to me, and that's concerning, because really I think the only way you really solve problems and give people a a real confidence in what the government is doing is to have even just a little bit of bipartisanship and cooperation. And certainly that's a two-way street, right? But it's a two-way street. Both sides have to figure out that, okay, we might have to give up a little bit on our ideal policy position here. And until they do that, we're not going to get the kind of outcomes that I think people really want.
One thing that I thought about when they were making such a show out of him signing some of the executive orders, because you do know that like this is setting the tone for his first 100 days. But what I was thinking too was when they were talking about reversal, I'm thinking how much money of our tax dollars has now been wasted. And there's a way to go about these things that you don't have to make them so public, but really at the end of the day, and the way they're throwing around these terms about billions and trillions, and they're putting it wrapped in the coronavirus relief, we need to remember when you say the federal versus the state, it's all taxpayer money.
Right. It's all the viewers and listeners' money that are tuned into the Megacast. It really is. You have to wonder, and I will say that they make these things public and do quite a bit of publicity around them. I actually think that's a good thing because it's transparency. It lets us know and lets us ask the questions that you just did, right? How much money are we wasting now, or have we wasted, or are we going to waste with this pivot from one policy to another?
So looking ahead, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but anything we should be looking out for and with Trump, how long before he reemerges?
I think it's a fabulous question, right? I don't know how he reemerges, right? I mean, and to some extent that's up to the press. If they cover him, he'll reemerge, right? If they put a bank of cameras out in front of Mar-a-Lago, I bet you he comes out. But if they don't, he doesn't have a platform, right? I think a couple things to watch out for at the federal level, right? We've got to watch how the next relief package, which I think could actually get some bipartisan agreement if there's a little bit of give on each side, right? Wouldn't that be nice, is to have something that goes back about a year when that first big relief package passed with overwhelming majority in the House and the Senate. That would be a great way to have to start 2021 from a political perspective. I'm not sure that's going to happen. It looks more and more likely that the Democrats in the House and the Senate will use a tool called budget reconciliation that will let them move this thing without much, if any, Republican support. I'd also say, too, it'll be interesting to watch how the Senate handles impeachment. Once they start, the rules, as I understand them, are that they have they can't do anything else but impeachment. So, and that's another factor, right? If that's how it goes, how many people start asking the question, okay, you're doing this to what end? What about all the other things that you said you were going to do? When are we going to get to those?
Yeah, the things that matter to us now. It's going to be interesting to see if Trump is waiting for the outcome of the impeachment before he steps in front of the cameras again.
That's a great point. Very possible. Yeah.
About 20 seconds here left with you, Professor. Tell us anything coming up with your the Center for Civic Engagement. I know you had one this past week. Anything on the agenda?
Yeah, in a couple of weeks, we're going to get to a reprisal of our office hours series where we feature faculty from Oakland University, and they take questions from folks who tune in to a virtual event.
Well, thank you again. And again, people can find that online because you guys have a great staff over there at Oakland University. We're lucky to have you here in our backyard. Professor Dave Dulio with us here on the Megacast. He's the professor of political science and the director for the Center for Civic Engagement over at Oakland University. That's going to wrap it up for the Wednesday edition of the Megacast. We want to say thank you for taking time out of your day to tune in.